At FIU, because of that program that went on a few years ago, that was one of the first times that I actually started thinking about Islam and Muslim communities beyond the Latino Muslim community in the United States, which is where my research started in Houston, Texas, and starting to look at the hemisphere as a whole. And so I'm indebted to the university for that program because it started me on the path that I've been on now for about 5 years. And so I'm not only thankful in that general sense, but also thankful to the center, to the faculty, and most importantly to you who are here, who have taken time out of your schedule. Maybe it's extra credit for a class, which, that's cool. Maybe it's just credit, like you've been told to be here. But I hope it's enjoyable. I hope it's beneficial. More than anything else, I hope that this might be a spark to inspire you to then go on and do this research, because this is a continually emerging field. We're in need of more and more scholars doing work in this area. And so today, I'm going to tell the overall narrative and story of Islam and Muslim communities in Latin America and the Caribbean, both past and present. It's going to be a bit like, the best I could say is drinking water from a fire hose, okay? So there's going to be a lot coming at you, and you're going to catch a little bit. A lot more is going to rush past you, and that's okay. The same thing happens to me every time I give this lecture, okay? And so one of the cool things, though, is I always know you're going to learn something. There's going to be something you take away that you did not know before. But I want to test your knowledge first. And I've heard that the best way when you're a guest speaker is to ingratiate yourself to the community you're speaking in front of, to kind of build a rapport and a connection. And I thought the best way to do that would be to have a quiz to start, okay? So pop quiz, my statistics professor as an undergrad used to have a disco ball and disco music playing every time we had a pop quiz as a way to encourage a positive environment for what otherwise is a horrible experience. So imagine perhaps in this context some reggaeton instead, and some good music going on. But we're gonna start with a quiz. It's just 5 questions, pretty easy. Keep your own score, okay? But true or false? It's the first one. Brazil is the largest exporter of halal meat in the world. Take a minute to think about it or to Google it. I see some of your hands drop to your keyboard, like I'm going to figure this out. Okay, I know the tricks. Okay, what do you think? How many say true? Just go bold, go big. Okay, true, false? Okay, all of you didn't raise your hand, playing it safe, I get it, okay. You think it in your head, you can change it if I say one or the other. It's true. Okay? It was true at least a couple of years ago. The statistics can change, of course, and things happen in global economies, etc. But yeah, it is generally true. They are one of the top exporters of halal meat in the world. They're one of the top exporters of beef in the world anyways. But they are one of the top exporters of halal meat. There's a great dissertation written about this at the University of Florida, somebody in our political science department. Okay, second question. Okay. Which Spanish festivals in the Americas represented Muslims as monsters or enemies and also helped colonize indigenous bodies? Choose all that apply. Some of you may know some of these festivals or these groups. So Festival de Santiago, Carnival, Festival de Corpus Christi, Semana Santa. Okay, choose all that apply. Okay, anybody got some guesses? Let me hear back from you now. Which one do you think? Definitely, they had Muslims represented in this festival as monsters or as the enemy, and then they also kind of transplanted that to make indigenous peoples in the Americas into Muslims or Moors, Moros. Have you heard about it? Have you seen it? Any guesses?
Festival de
Corpus Christi, okay. B, Carnival?
Yeah.
Okay, possibly. Anybody else? Semana Santa. Anybody want to say A, just so that way we at least guessed all 4 of them? Okay. Okay. I don't know what that is. That's fair enough. Okay. We're going to come back to this one, but it is A, C, and D. Definitely. I'm sorry. I mean, Carnival is super fun, and there may be some stuff there. Okay. I'm willing to say there's stuff I haven't found out yet. But yeah, A, C, and D have all had elements of this, particularly A and C. Okay, A and C. So we're going to come back to this one in particular. We may mention this one as well. So we'll be able to double click on that one. Okay, so which Latin American or Caribbean country has the highest percentage of Muslims per capita of the nation's population? Any guesses out there? Or just straight knowledge? This guy's bold. D? Suriname.
Trinidad.
Trinidad. D. Okay. Anybody else want to guess Brazil or Mexico? It's weird. Okay, so we're between A or D. It's D. Suriname. Okay. Around 30% of the population. Okay. Yeah. So there you go. Good. Good. This guy knew it confidently. He studied for this. He knows. Okay. Okay. Muslims represented an estimated blank percentage of the 12 to 15 million Africans in the transatlantic slave trade. A, B, C, or D?
C.
C. It's bold. It's bold. It's good. It's good. He also guessed Carnival, though, so you may not want to go with him. I don't know. Okay. Anybody else?
A.
A. D. Anybody want to guess B? No? It's A. 33%, about a third. Okay? Doing well. Last one. Here we go. There are an estimated blank Spanish words that have their roots in the Arabic language. Okay, there's debate on this, but this is the estimate, okay? 1,976, 3,000, 350, 5,000.
B.
B.
D.
D. This guy goes big or goes home. I like it, okay? Anybody else? It's B, around 3,000 different words from pantalones to azúcar, okay? Yeah, calzone. I mean, there's a bunch of words out there. I mean, there are about 3,000 of them, okay? Good. So already, you've got your money's worth today, I hope. You've learned something. You've got a factoid. You can tweet about it. This weekend at a party, you can flash it out there. I don't know if you knew this, but Brazil is the largest exporter of halal meat in the world. And people are like, ooh, you're so smart. So there you go. That's my gift to you. But today, the idea is not just to get these little factoids, not to have fake quizzes, not to just go big or go home with our guesses, okay? The idea here is to get an overview of the narrative of Islam and Muslim communities, past and present. And to start that, we need to talk a little bit about what it means to study Islam from a more global perspective than perhaps we might assume that we would. Usually, when we talk about a Muslim world, people think of what region? What do you think? I'm assuming you said Middle East. The sound impact here is a little bit like you said, but it's okay. Middle East and maybe North Africa, maybe Indonesia. One cool thing that I've enjoyed over the last 10 years of doing public speaking on Islam and Muslim communities is that 10 years ago I'd ask, what is the nation with the largest Muslim population in the world? And maybe 1 out of every 20-something people would know Indonesia. Nowadays, most people know that factoid, okay? So my hope is that someday later, these factoids are going to be the ones that people know in 20 years. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what it means to study global Islam and to study it beyond the geographies that we might associate with it in this region of the world. So there's a lot of discussion about this idea of discursive traditions, that there's not one tradition of Islam, but instead there are multiple traditions in discourse with one another, arguing over the why and the what and the how of Islam. And those discussions and those traditions are linked with power dynamics, right? Trying to enforce certain visions of Islam and Muslim practice and belief onto themselves, onto others, onto the global scene. And we're going to see some of those dynamics kind of come up in our discussion today when we go into particular Latin American and Caribbean contexts. But it is very difficult to speak of any one Islam or one specific Islamic tradition. At the same time, there was this whole movement a while where people said, well, then we need to pay attention to like local context. So let's talk about American Islam or Afghanistan's Islam, or let's talk about Islam in these particular communities or cultures, because that's what's more important. Maybe there's not one Islam, but there are multiple Islams, plural. But at the same time, these multiple Islams, if you want to go with that, are still speaking back to certain texts and certain traditions, certain movements, and certain supralocal or global or broader ideas and practices and beliefs. And so the best thing is to instead think about the tensions and the borders and the exchanges that happen between both the global and the local. And that's kind of what happens in our studies. You're going to see that kind of fleshed out as we continue. But one great question that's been asked a lot in recent years, and people are really wrestling with these days, is whither the Muslim world? Okay, where is it? What is it? What can we talk about when we think the Muslim world? When I say Muslim world, just do some word association. What do you think? When I say Muslim world, what do you picture? What words come to mind? What images, traditions, ideas? The Middle East, mosques?
The Islamic Republic.
The Islamic Republic? Of Iran, yeah, okay.
Muhammad, Mecca.
Muhammad, Mecca.
Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia.
The Hajj.
The Hajj. Okay. Certain dress, okay. The Quran, yeah. There's some certain images that kind of come to mind when we think of the Muslim world. And what I'm more interested in sometimes is particular geographies, right? So Middle East, North Africa usually gets imagined as the Muslim world. I come from a journalism background. And usually when you see the Muslim world used in a journalistic piece, in a news piece, whether that be in radio or print or on TV, on broadcast, they usually are referring to a very particular geography, the Middle East or North Africa. And there's a lot of people going, why? What's going on there? Why do we assume that that's the Muslim world? What makes that the quote-unquote Muslim world? When did this idea of a quote-unquote Muslim world emerge? Why do we limit it geographically? Recently there's been a book that's come out, if you want to find some good reading that you can do, is this idea of the Muslim world. And demonstrate that this idea, the quote-unquote Muslim world, is kind of a modern colonial invention, as so many things are, right? Things that we just kind of took for granted or were accepted fact. Now we're sitting back going, well, this was created at a certain time and in a certain place to do a certain thing. And so in this book, it's demonstrated that there's a kind of racially imagined entity, the Muslim world, that was kind of birthed into a context of the late 19th century imperial world by Westerners and colonized Muslims alike, okay? Even so, I think there's still some purchase to this idea of the Muslim world, because it still has some force when you say it, when you talk about it. I do ethnography, so I sit with people, I talk with people, participant observation, interviews, lots of coffee, okay? I also really enjoy Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's what gets me going in the morning when I got to go out and do ethnography. These are the elements of good anthropological study, okay? And when I'm out there talking to people, they use this term, okay? And it still has purchase in their language. And they are trying to argue in Latin American and Caribbean context that where they live, where they are, is a part of the Muslim world. And they have certain arguments about that. And so I kind of reflect that in some of my lectures, even though I'm still understanding that the Muslim world is a bit of a construct. It's a bit of an idea that we've made, okay? And we can critique that in some ways. And particularly the way I try to critique it is to say, well, it can also be a tradition and a space and a community that is an area we haven't thought about before, we haven't explored too much. And one such region is the Americas, the hemisphere as a whole, right? Today we're going to focus on Latin America and the Caribbean and particular geographies within that. But I taught a course on this at the University of Florida. It was really cool. Sorry you weren't there. We had lots of fun. It was really super cool. Good class, good students. It was in conjunction with our Center for Latin American Studies. And we looked at North America and Latino Muslims in the United States, and then also in Latin America and the Caribbean. And out of that, my students said, you know, hey, it was a really cool course, but you had us reading some things that were really specific, really focused. What we need is a kind of introductory text. And so I'm writing that text at the moment. And what I'm going to share with you today are some of the particular contexts that I'm exploring or the ones I haven't yet. And here's my request. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end, okay, where you get to ask questions or you get to tell me where I'm wrong or things I haven't thought about yet. And if you do that, then it's almost like you're going to write the book for me. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, okay, that'll be cool. But as we do this, there's some things to keep in mind. Okay? What we're going to try to do, or what I'm going to try to do today, is kind of place Latin America and the Caribbean and the broader Latino US with a broader Muslim world, and then locate also Muslims of various trajectories and genealogies and courses and currents in this hemisphere over time. So say basically this region has been part of a quote-unquote Muslim world for a longer time than maybe we have imagined or thought, and that also that Muslims have been a part of American history in ways that maybe we have not recognized as well. Okay? And this one is important to me on kind of a practical level as well. I don't know if you've noticed, okay, but Islam and Muslims evoke certain reactions in the United States these days. I don't know if that's come across your radar at any point in time, okay? But I think it's daily in the news. I'm designing a course right now at the University of Florida, and somebody in the design center, I had an assignment where I said that students need to go find articles about Islam and Muslims and perceptions about them for an Introduction to Islam course. And they said, do you think students will have an easy time doing that? And I said, if they have Google, it'll be cool. They'll be fine. Because every day there's something new being produced, okay? And so there's a lot of talk of Islam and Muslims being foreign to this part of the world. And my research and work tries to imagine them as part of this region and this world, okay? So let's talk about the history. How long has it been going on? It's a cool book here. I'm just going to throw this up here. It's a great scholar, Caroline Cook, wrote this book, Forbidden Passages about Muslims and Moriscos in Colonial Spanish America. The ways that they were brought over, the ways that they came over, the traditions that they brought, the ideas that they brought, the practices that they brought. These are some images of Muslims in the Spanish Americas back in the 16th century. So a lot of good archival research there. But when you think about historical periods, there are generally 3 historical periods that you need to think about. If you're taking notes, try to make it easy to think about these 3 different periods. First is the colonial period that Caroline writes about, from the 15th to the 19th centuries, where there were explorers and conquerors and Moriscos, or kind of secret Muslims, outwardly Muslims coming from the Iberian Peninsula, Muslim American slaves, Javanese Indian indentured servants that kind of came through this 300, 400 year period. Some came by choice, many more came by force, right? Particularly among slaves. That 33% that I mentioned that came over from places in West Africa. There were also more kind of forced pulling factors for Javanese and Indian indentured servants through British, Dutch, and other colonial ownership in the Americas. But there are also Muslim explorers. There were also Muslim conquerors. And also, even if you weren't Muslim, as we'll see here in a moment, you also brought the ideas that you had about Muslims in places like Spain, or North Africa, Indonesia, or elsewhere, that colonizers who were non-Muslim brought with them to the Americas, okay? The second major period in history is Middle Eastern migration from the late 19th to early 20th centuries. This was really when Muslim communities became institutionalized. They were Islamic centers built, mosques built, community organizations that were started, clinics, schools, things like that started to build. Particularly in the mid-20th century, it really picked up. 1950s, 60s, 70s, and up until today, Middle Eastern immigrants have really left their mark in various places. Predominantly Palestinian, Jordanian, Lebanese. In Puerto Rico, where I do my work, the Muslim community there is somewhere between like 75 to 90% Palestinian. Okay? They've come over, they've had successful businesses, they've been able to build the majority of the mosques there, and they've been very successful in their time. And then the third kind of historical period, which overlaps with that second historical period in many ways, is a growing number of conversion of non-Arabs across the hemisphere in the 20th and 21st centuries. And they're trying to figure out their place in this world, in the Muslim world as a whole, but then also in their particular communities. So with Puerto Rican Muslims in particular, I think of them often as quadruple minorities in some ways, or Latino Muslims in general this way. They are Muslim within the Latino community, they're a minority. They're Muslims inside the Latino community, the minority. And then they are also Muslim and Latino in a broader United States context, okay? And so I'm intrigued by people choosing to be more of a minority than they even were before when they convert, right? And then how do they deal with that? How do they navigate being on the margins of every community that they identify with? And there are some interesting ways that they do that. And we're going to kind of talk about that. So those are the 3 overall historical periods. And what they tell us is generally what Michael Gomez has here in this other book called Black Crescent. Anybody ever read this book? This book's been around for a while. Black Crescent, with a picture of Malcolm X on the front of it. Nobody's read it. Go read it. That's your homework assignment. I'm going to check back next week. I'm going to fly all the way back down from New York. Okay, we're going to have another quiz. That's what's going to happen. Black Crescent tells the story of African American and African Muslims throughout the American hemisphere, okay? And he makes this point about African Muslims in particular, but the idea that they had an impact on the early trajectory of the Americas through their sedition and their rebellion, their influence in culture and economy and politics, and also their influence in African American cultural patterns, songs and music cultures such as jazz and other places. And this quote in particular is what I like. He says, they left an undeniable legacy in the New World. So this is part of that as part of, and to imagine Muslims as part of the American story culturally, in particular ways. Why do you think this type of history might matter? Understanding Muslims as part of American history from all the way back to the beginning of colonial contact up until today. Why might that matter in this particular historical moment? Yeah?
I was going to say because, well, there might be some here that are Muslims and it might trace back to their family histories. So it's kind of important to know about your ancestry, where you came from, and how you stand in society today.
Yeah, so it might be personally important for Muslims who are here to have that
and
genealogy.
Church as well, like scholarly care.
I mean, it literally gives me a job, so it's very nice. Yes? Yeah.
Well, there's also a lot of ignorance in the country too on the perception of Muslims, and it would actually help people who aren't Muslim or never have been connected to see that they have contributed to this nation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not so foreign.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts percolating around there? Yeah.
To understand all the different historical accents, historical variables that form the American continent and its diversity, its national formations.
Right. Yeah. To see multiple threads that have been knit together here by hook or by crook, forgotten or celebrated. Yeah. Yeah.
Just kind of going off what he said, like today in politics, we don't want to let the Syrian refugees come in, and if we have an understanding of what happened in our past, we know that they were actually here, and it's not about them being foreigners, but just welcoming them back in.
Yeah, it challenges some ideas about us and them, right, and what those categories mean. But one student in my class that I taught at UF in the evaluation, and then they also said this to me personally, and I really appreciate it. They said, yeah, I mean, it's great to learn history, but it's really not going to change people's minds, okay? It's one thing to talk about history and get little factoids and share it at a cocktail party. It's another thing to actually change the trajectory of our us-them ideas and to actually form a more cosmopolitan and global understanding of identity. And so I take that to heart as well. And so I really hope this is the beginning of a conversation, right? Because it's not just going to happen taking notes, doing a quiz, writing a book. Those things don't necessarily change the world, unfortunately. A shocker, right? It has to be done on the ground. It has to be done in relationships. And so also we have to realize that as much as we may learn history, we also have to make that history in the present moment, right? So let's talk about how Muslims in various contexts are making that history in the present moment. We're going to talk about 4 contexts, hopefully, okay, as we have our time. This is a great picture here. It's a little montage, a little mashup of various Latino Muslims from across the United States, and some of them representing their particular countries of origin or heritage. These are some Mexicana Muslimas, as they call themselves, and they dressed up in the tricolors, okay, as they don their hijab or celebrate their culture. This is Mujahid Fletcher, or Jaime Fletcher, okay, he's Colombian, and he started an organization called Islam in Spanish. Again, Google that, check it out. He does all types of Islamic resources, teaching in Spanish, translates ancient documents, also writes his own new fresh material, has a killer YouTube page, excellent Instagram, all of that stuff. They're very hip with it, you might say. Okay, but also they founded what currently is the U.S.'s only Latino-specific mosque in Houston, Texas. It's called Centro Islamico. And this is a picture from its opening. I was just with Mujahid 2.5-3 weeks ago, and I asked him, how's it been going? He says, well, we've been open for almost 2 years. He's like, we've had 87 shahadas. It's 87 people who have confessed Islam and as their faith, that there is no God but God and Muhammad is his prophet. And that's a pretty impressive rate of conversion in that community, in that part of Houston. Okay? 87 people to convert in their time. They started with about 40 or 50 people. So they've already kind of doubled and tripled on top of that. So very successful organization there. So looking at the region as a whole, okay, there's been steady growth, but we have to admit that it's growing faster than the general Muslim population, but it's because it had a very low place to start with, and it's still a very small minority. People often ask me, well, how many Muslims are there, Ken? Justify to me the job that you have and the work that you do. And I go, well, maybe it's not about numbers, but it's about a wider influence or what's going on with these minorities here. But in general, there's just 1.4 million Muslims in Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, you can break it down into their regions as well. There are vastly more in Northern America, okay? The vast majority being in the US here, okay? When you look at particular countries, these are the top 10 American Muslim populations by country, okay? You might grab a screenshot of that. So Suriname, although it has the highest percentage per capita rate, it's not that high up on this list, although it's still pretty high up there, right? But these are the kind of breakdowns. Brazil and Argentina have large populations. Some of these numbers are not necessarily reliable. It's a pretty good guess that Venezuela's numbers are a little bit inflated, okay? Because there are the argument goes from some of the scholars saying, well, they have certain political reasons to say they have a larger Muslim population there than they might actually have in terms of trying to create bilateral connections or multilateral connections. But yeah, I mean, in general, these numbers are fairly reliable. This one obviously is like all over the place, okay? So there's some all over the place type of estimates, but it gives you an idea. There are sizable populations made up largely of migrants, okay? But also an increasing number of converts. So let's look at some particular communities. Let's look at Cuba, okay? A fairly large community here, somewhere around 9,000 to 10,000, just making up 0.1% of the population, but a very diverse community made up of immigrants from the Middle East and North Africa, but also a large number of Yemeni, Nigerian, Indonesian students and professionals, doctors, a lot of medical students that have come over to study there and have stayed or are staying for a longer period of time. And what's interesting to me here, okay, is that over a course of 2 years, Turkey and Saudi Arabia sought to build the first mosque in Cuba. The first mosque in Havana. Did anybody hear about this out in the news? It got some news purchase and some news stories. And I wrote a little bit about this as a way to, again, talk about the ways that the Americas is currently connected to what we might imagine as the Muslim world, right? So a lot of people talk about Turkey and Saudi Arabia kind of competing with one another to be the global leaders of Sunni Islam. That when people think of Sunni Muslim political entities or countries, they would think of either Turkey or Saudi Arabia, that one of them would shine forth as the kind of global standard bearers of Sunni Muslim ideas and practice and political power. Okay? And people perhaps think of Syria or think of other locations in the Middle East where Turkey and Saudi Arabia are competing with one another, even if they're on the same side, they're trying to kind of joust for leadership, or they're kind of competing against each other in particular situations. And what I try to argue is that you can also think of Havana, Cuba as a place where they are also competing with one another to joust in order to say, we are the leaders of the Sunni Muslim world. Back in 2014, the president of Turkey, Erdogan, took a visit to Havana. And when he was there, he was on a boat, and he was looking up, and he said, this is where Columbus saw a mosque in Havana. He made this statement. And everyone there, part of the Cuban delegation, and many people among the Turkish delegation did one of these things. They said, what? They just kind of stopped for a second. They said, what did you say? And he didn't retract it. You know, sometimes you hear politicians kind of kind of go back from what they said. But he kind of doubled down on it. He was like, yeah, when Columbus came here, he saw a mosque. There's these historical sources. And he quoted a couple of scholars that had said, when Columbus arrived, he saw a mosque. And it's true, there is something there in Columbus's diaries that he says, I saw, and it depends on the translation, there's debate about this, okay? But the translation I go with is, I saw something as if it were a mosque on this hill in Havana. And some have taken that to mean that there was pre-Columbian Muslim contact with the Americas. There's actually a whole realm of research about this, that Muslims discovered, quote unquote, the New World, quote unquote, before Europeans did. There's also a lot about Vikings and China. I mean, everybody else other than Europeans discovered the Americas before the Europeans did, okay? I think that's generally what people are going for. But one of them is Erdogan. He really bought into that. And he said, we should build a mosque there. So part of his trip was not only to build trade and to build political connections, but also to try and have Turkey build Havana's first mosque. It was an unfortunate thing for Erdogan to then be told by Raul himself. He said, well, someone else wants to build a mosque here too, Saudi Arabia. And you could almost hear Erdogan be like, dang it, okay? You're like, I got here. And so then they competed. They kind of had different, they had like two contractors competing to have a mosque built. And so I wrote this chapter and I said, who knows who's going to win, right? And the day that chapter got published, I got a note from a friend in Cuba saying, the mosque just got completed. And I was like, what? My scholarship is already irrelevant? And he's like, yes. And that's such a good feeling. But anyways, I got to go down there in March and see the mosque. But no one could tell me who built it. So we're going to explore who actually built this mosque, okay? So if any of you have ever been down there, we're talking about Old Havana, kind of the historical area of the city. You get down here into this plaza of Cesar Francisco, and you walk up. Where's the street here? I'm getting a little, Calle Oficios, okay? So you walk up from here, kind of a big area near this convent. Very touristy spot, highly trafficked area of the city. And you walk up there, this is the view looking up from the convent and the plaza. I'm going to walk up this little street right here and kind of explore down there. Very packed. And I'm walking along and all of a sudden I come across this. Okay? And this is the facade of the mosque. And here is Mesquite Babylon. Okay? It's founded on June 17th, 2015. Okay? Arabic, Spanish. Still no great clues as to what's going on here. So I walk inside. It is beautiful. It is a gorgeous space. Okay? Lots of wonderful artwork done. You can see how it transcends all the way down to the cubbies. Lots of people there. That's why I took a picture of shoes. It's not just a weird photo. Okay, it shows you how many people are there for Friday prayers. You can also very clearly see my gringo being in Cuba hat right there. Okay, good evidence of who I am and my presence in that place. Okay, and then I take a seat, and again, pretty beautiful spot, right? Lots of money poured in. There were 12 ACs in the room. Okay, this is what in-depth, thick description scholarship does. It counts the number of air conditioners in the room, and it was a blessed respite from the heat outside. But they were all running. They were all functioning. It was ice cold in there. Okay, they had a great PA system. I take this picture here to show even the skylight up top. Okay, it's like whoever built this poured some serious money into it. Then someone came up to give the khutbah, the address, okay? He was speaking in Arabic the entire time, okay? And he spoke from the minbar. And then Imam Yahya, you can barely make him out here, but he's this guy right here with the mic right here, okay? Not up on the minbar, but he does it in Spanish, okay? He's been Muslim for about 30 years. He's one of the earliest Muslims to convert in Cuba. And he's been running a mosque, like a prayer space, out of his house for many years. Okay, so he's been the leader of the community. And it was interesting to me to see now that he was down in position. It was also an interesting thing to see that he was in a different space, in a different place. Okay, and a lot of people didn't know who he was. So there's a pretty large enough community gathered there, and then I was able to talk to some people afterwards, but no one was really talking to me about who built the mosque, and it was kind of an awkward question to ask. So I thought, I'll check the bulletin board. I want you to notice also what I finally saw on the bulletin board as I took this picture with my iPhone. Yeah, okay, I broke rules, and I felt really bad. But I'm glad I got this picture because then I was able to look deeper at this and their explanations of Islam for people just kind of walking by and checking things out, explaining different aspects of the faith and what the communities, what the mosque community is doing in the neighborhoods that they live in. But also, too, they had these rules written there about not selling things and the very specific religious purpose of the building and some evidence of things about, religious space in Cuba. And then this one. This is the one that I was really interested to read, because second paragraph, last line, last set of words. Okay? Saudi Arabia was thanked, okay, for its part in making sure that this mosque was built. And then I talked to a few people afterwards that Saudi Arabia was able to build this mosque, that the guy who was speaking came from Saudi Arabia. He's been assigned as the imam there as well. There was also evidence in other places in Havana of design. This is at the Hotel Nacional. Okay, one of the kind of fanciest, biggest hotels there in Havana. Great place for gringos like myself to get a pina colada or whatever it might be. But also these Andalusian tile designs that are there. Another place in the city where there was kind of Andalusian design elements. And then even to go down to the cathedral, I like to point out these kind of like little false windows that are here. This design element, I'm totally blanking on the name of it, it actually comes from Andalusian Spain. You see it on cathedrals throughout the Americas. You also see it, anybody ever gone to San Antonio and gone to the Alamo? Mm-hmm. Those are on the Alamo there. So I always like to point that out because that's an example of Andalusian and Moorish, Muslim, Jewish, Christian kind of combined design elements coming into even the facades of cathedrals and major monuments in the Americas. Again, showing that influence from the Muslim world here. And then also even on menus. Moros, Moors, Spanish Muslims, y Cristianos, black beans and white rice. The irony contains pork. That's a slow burn. Okay, there's humor in this. It's okay, you can laugh, okay? But also too, see the racial elements that are there. Can you guess which one the Moros are? The black beans. And the Cristianos? The white rice, right? This is a dish you can find in other places, the Dominican Republic, you can find it in Puerto Rico, you can find it elsewhere, okay? Some of you may have even had it before and called it that. But again, it comes from this idea of who's Moorish and who's Christian, who's Muslim, who's not. How do we divide them racially, conceptually? That comes out even more, again, as we start to look at Puerto Rico, which is my particular context that I do my research in. And to start that, we need to kind of go back to Andalusia. Okay? This is this medieval Muslim territory and cultural domain, this empire a bit, and the Iberian Peninsula, where Muslims had a significant presence at various times and in various ways for about 800 years, for a pretty long time. Before they were driven out and the Iberian Peninsula became a place of Christian dominance. Okay? So you can see here on the Iberian Peninsula the kind of spaces that they used to have, places that still reflect that culture where you can go and visit. Anybody ever been to like Alhambra or anything like that yet in their lives? It's a beautiful place. Okay? You can still see the strong Moorish influence there. Comes out of a long trajectory of history of different caliphates and dynasties. So when the Umayyad dynasty fell, it then kind of went into exile all the way up in here after it expanded into North Africa and into Spain. And it kind of continued that caliphate, that dynasty for years. They left, architectural space and evidence still that you can go and see. Okay? Includes also North Africa. A lot of people always think of Andalusia as Spain, but it also came from the Almohads and the Almoravids in North Africa. Okay? And I always like to say that, of course, in 1492, Columbus sailed the Ocean Blue. We all know this, right? But also in 1492 was the year that the Reconquista was, quote unquote, completed by Christian forces in Spain. That's significant, right? Because the people who were at war with Moors and Muslims and Jews and others that were non-Christian, as they started to kind of make this difference in Christian Spain and Muslim Spain at that time, they fought in those wars. They were the battle-hardened soldiers that were then recruited and requested to come over to the Americas as they started to colonize those spaces. And so there were practices, songs, traditions, festivals, parades, ideas that these soldiers brought with them to the Americas. And when they thought of the enemy, they thought of who? They thought of Moros. They thought of Muslims. And so oftentimes in their journals and their recollections and in their writings, you hear them referring to the indigenous people of the Americas as Moros. They said their language sounds like Arabic. Okay? They made these connections. And so they brought them in their imagination to the New World and imagined them as monsters. Okay? So they made this connection that they were the others, they were the evil, they were the personification of non-Christian bad things. And they brought that idea with them to the New World. And it showed up in festivals like the Festival of Santiago Apostol in various places throughout the Americas. This is how it's celebrated in Loíza Aldea, just east of San Juan in Puerto Rico today. These are called vejigantes. Anybody familiar with these? Okay, some of you might know these. A big symbol of Puerto Rican culture to this day. But originally, the idea was this. St. James, Santiago, the brother of Jesus, okay, he came back to help the Christian soldiers defeat the Muslims in Spain. Okay? So they sometimes call him Santiago Matamoros, St. James the Moor Slayer. Okay? Possibly a great band name, but also the name of a saint. Okay? And he rode forth on his white horse to defeat the Moorish evil individuals. And that is recreated in the Festival of Santiago Apostol each year here, where you have caballeros who are, the gentlemen, the kind of followers and soldiers fighting on side and on behalf of Santiago Apostol, and they are defeating the vejigantes, who were originally cast as kind of demonic manifestations of Muslims. Now you ask people today who the vejigantes are, they do not tell you, oh, those are the Muslims. It's very clear. In fact, nobody has ever said that to me, unless I kind of go, well, what's the history? And they go, oh yeah, well, way back in the day. And even most Muslims there, even if they go celebrate this, I was with a Puerto Rican Muslim out here at this time, and I took the picture. He's right next to me. And he would be like, I don't really look at them and think Muslim. And I don't think anybody here does. But there's a history there. You can see it here. This is Santiago Matamoros riding over the turban Muslims below him. Okay? So you can see the representations there. There are different statues that they parade through the city. There's one of the men, one of the women, and one of the children. Each of them has different representations. This is Santiago Matamoros, again, riding over the Muslims being destroyed. Mary's in backup, okay? So that's where they are. I give you lots of perspectives here, just so you can really get this perspective of Santiago Matamoros right there. This is. I was also just having fun with my camera. Okay, so very cool. And this is the one of the women. It's a little less violent, but very decorated with promesas, etc. This is the one of the children. Oh, that's cute. That's like, Santiago Matamoros-ish. It's not quite there. But even so, we've got a nice black Muslim being killed here. Yeah, we don't want to forget that, even though it's for kids. Look at the beheaded blood pool. It's a little dark here, okay, of a Moros Negros individual, okay? In the parade, you've got the caballeros, you've got the vejigantes, you got me taking selfies, okay? Then you've got this guy. I mean, there's lots of stuff happening at this festival, okay? But it's highly celebrated, highly recognized. And what it's interesting is most people, again, wouldn't know the history behind it. That these vejigantes that they throw on the front of this Jeep, okay, is actually a representation historically of Moors, of Muslims. It's now a prime festival. It's actually like the chief festival put forward by Puerto Rican cultural authorities saying this is Puerto Rican culture. And at the heart is this contest between Christianity and Islam. Lots of music going on there as well as you kind of go along. It's a huge festival, big thing. Now in Puerto Rico itself, okay, Muslims came there as part of the conquests and the imagination, but they also came as part of the slave trade. This is a great map that you can look up online that shows the numbers coming from particular places, okay, into particular regions. And so each place you can kind of follow along this map. You can start to follow how Muslims arrived and in what numbers they arrived as well, and start looking at the differences there. Today, of course, you've come with people like Salim. Salim has been in a mountain town, okay, for the last 37 years, I think he's been there. Okay, he owns the shop that sells appliances and all types of things. He also gives away free coffee. Okay, it literally says, come have a cup of coffee with me. We may do business, but even better, we'll have a conversation. He's one of the sweetest men I've ever met, okay? And he has built up the institution there, and they've created about, or they have about 5,000 Muslims and created about 9 to 11 prayer spaces that are there. And there's also reverts, or people who are converts. They call themselves reverts for 2 reasons. They believe that everyone's born Muslim, and so you're just simply reverting back to Islam. But they also say that my Andalusian forebears, okay, they were Muslim before they were Christian. I'm simply reverting to the religion I was meant to be a part of historically, okay? These are all the mosques there in Puerto Rico. This one was unfortunately destroyed in the hurricane recently. So I don't know what the status is currently, but the area was pretty well destroyed. The trees kind of fell and destroyed things. This is the most recognizable one. It's hard to see up there. This is a main highway in Puerto Rico heading west from San Juan. And you can see the mosque from there. Whenever I told people that I was there with the Muslim community in Puerto Rico, they would say, oh, the mosque in Vega Alta. I know that one, okay? Because you can see it from the freeway, so I kind of give you that picture. But there are various other ones. Can you find the mosque here? You won't be able to, I guarantee you, because I made the picture too small. But there's just a little bit of Arabic script right here. It's just this little, the space right here, and on top of the pawn shop. An excellent little ice cream place right there, too. One of my standard rules of doing ethnography is I have to have ice cream every day. So that was very convenient. This one's on top of a bakery owned by a Palestinian family, okay? And it's also her apartment, and she just has the mosque there. This is the one in Ponce, down in the south, very prominent. People know that one as well. But also is in people's homes, where perhaps they don't have access to a mosque in their particular area. So they're spread there throughout Puerto Rico. But it's also present in the diaspora as well, up in New York, okay? And there you have a long history of Puerto Ricans coming to places like New York and New Jersey and Florida, etc. And they have converted here, and they've come to know Islam here, and then they brought it back to Puerto Rico, or vice versa. There's an exchange there. And in fact, a lot of people talk about Centro Islamico. I mentioned earlier, a Latino-specific mosque in Houston. But the first Latino-specific mosque space in the United States was founded in El Barrio in East Harlem in 1987. It was called Alianza Islamica. And these guys came out of organizations like the Young Lords, okay, or the Nation of Islam, or the 5% Nation. I sometimes refer to them as the original gangstas of Puerto Rican Islam, and that's because by their own confession they were involved in gang life in East Harlem, and they found through Islam a way into a new world, a new concept of life. They became very politically active, took part in parades and manifestations throughout the 1980s and 1990s. They're still very proud of that identity. This is one of those guys not so young anymore, okay? But I want to look at this sweatshirt. Do you see how white it is? You see how clean that is? This is an original 1987 sweatshirt this guy is sporting. The care that he has taken, put a part of it. But you also see here how he's combined Taino, or the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, okay, imagery, along with the macheteros, okay, the kind of like independence fighter, okay, with a big Puerto Rican flag, Alianza Islamica. It's linked in with kind of independence movements as well, Puerto Rican independence movements. So there's some interesting intersections going on there. Okay, so I've gone on too long, which was what I expected. So we've got Trinidad and Mexico. We've got to make a choice over these next 10 minutes before we head to our Q&A time at 3. Do you want Trinidad or do you want Mexico? Mexico, great choice. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is the thing I hate doing. I'm just going to slide past all these cool things that we could have talked about. I mean, look at that. I mean, oh man, okay, now Mexico. Fantastic. So one cool thing about Mexico is that you've got many different types of communities represented in Mexico. Okay, there's a scholar, Marina, who talks about Islam in Mexico is represented and characterized by a minority of Mexicans, a lot of immigrants, some natives, okay, but by a series of various small groups or communities in the interior of the Mexican Republic and a relatively new history. But they have Sunni, Shia, Sufi, Salafi communities. So you've got all these little micro communities that exist throughout the country. They work with one another, they contest with one another, but it's really interesting how you get the full diversity of what you could call the Muslim world present in Mexico. Any type of strain of thought you could think of exists within the Muslim community in Mexico, is the argument of scholars who've done a lot more work there. Okay? And so you've got these immigrants that have come in and they form these different groups, okay, and they're distributed throughout the country. You've also got a great geographical spread. okay? And they've been able to adapt to various spaces, various historical periods. Caroline Cook in Forbidden Passages talks about Muslims in Mexico in the 16th century being really famous. I wore this today just to have this moment where you would go, what is he doing? Okay, do you know what this is? Anybody? What's wrapped up in this green pouch is an excerpt from the Quran, okay? It's been written a particular way to protect school children. And I was in Bosnia, and I was telling somebody that I'm a PhD student, and they said, oh, I'm so sorry. And then they gave me this, okay? And they said, this is to protect you from your advisory committee. So there you are. That's a gift to you, okay? So given to a student. Mexican Muslims back in the 16th century, Moriscos, were very famous for making these amulets for protections against disease, enemies, attacks, etc. Okay, so it's got a long history there. And one interesting community is the community just outside of San Cristobal de las Casas, okay? Anybody been down there into Chiapas before, okay? Anybody heard of this community before, San Cristobal de las Casas? So it's a small village just outside of San Cristobal de las Casas where the entire community converted to Islam. 400 to 500 people converted to Islam. So you've got this village, this town, that is made up of about 400, 500 Muslims just outside of San Cristobal de las Casas. The story goes that there were Murabitun missionaries. So this is like a kind of Sufi order founded by a Scottish guy who now lives in South Africa and was trained in Spain, okay, if you can follow all that, who trained missionaries and then sent them throughout the world, and he was trying to create a new economic order based on the dinar, okay? So he's trying to create this new world order based on an Islamic, financial system. And he sent his missionaries to connect with the Zapatistas in Mexico. They did not connect with them. Well, they connected with them, but the Zapatistas were like, no, we're okay, we're going to do our own thing. We've got our own kind of anti-globalization thing going on. And so the missionaries were told, well, can we come back to Spain? And he said, no, just stay there. And they went to this village and then converted the entire village. Okay, they earned their gold star. Okay, they did well. But now what's fascinating is over the years, there are some who are there who are part of the original Murabitun community. There are some who have broken off from that and formed their own Murabitun-esque community. And there are others who have joined just broader Sunni movements. So now within this village there are 3 separate prayer spaces with 3 separate communities out in the middle of southern Mexico. Okay? And a highly relevant part of their interaction here is their economic situation, their political situation, and their family dynamics. But what's interesting is to watch all of these children grow up in this context. Because while the parents converted, these children were born into the religion, right? And so there's been a lot of research done on the adults and the community and the dynamics, but what I'm fascinated about is how these children are going to then grow up in this type of world with this type of outlook, right? Where they know nothing else but being a Mexican Muslim. That is the only thing they know. And they know its diversity, they know its connections, they know the ways that it's been shaped by their local context, but also how it's informed by this global movement that includes Scotland and Spain and South Africa and other geographies as well. I promised you that this would be a little bit like drinking water from a fire hose. Would you agree? Yes. Okay. So let's leave some ample time for some Q&A. And some discussion. I'm open for questions, and we can certainly talk in this time. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Lisa Picard, Associate Director of the Latin American and Caribbean Center. Thanks so much for coming today. So I also been to see the mosque in Cuba, and I was there just after it had been inaugurated, and at that time I was told that it was not for locals to use, but rather to serve the tourist community. And something that also caught my attention, so I'm curious about the people that were there. Did you find out if they were Cubans or if they were foreigners who were just traveling in Cuba and were there for their own purposes?
That's great.
Something that caught my attention is that placement is in Old Havana, which is ground zero for tourism, right?
Right.
And it seemed like a very convenient demonstration of quote-unquote openness and religious tolerance by the Cubans to have this mosque on one of the main drags, that tourists would go by. And to me, it seemed like a very obvious political, move rather than something that really was done to support or develop any Muslim community in Havana. And a block up, there's, the Jewish hotel,
Yeah.
where they happen to have a menorah in the lobby, and they say that's for all of the Jewish people in Havana, in Montfort. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So I'll go back to the first thing, that this is for the immigrants and students, et cetera, that are there. That is probably its official purpose. So before, I don't know if you saw the Casa de los Árabes, right across the way.
Yeah.
That's where the immigrants and diplomats, et cetera, used to go and pray. And so they requested a spot to have an actual masjid, an actual place to go in a building, right? And an imam and all of those things. And so that's the official purpose. Yet, there were plenty of local Cubans. The guy who was right in front of me that I in that first picture on the inside, he had actually come from the east, okay, and relocated to Havana so that he could be at a mosque. Imam Yahya, who I showed there, he's there. And then there are plenty of others. At the same time, there are Yemenis, Nigerians, Indonesians that I talked with that use that space. And I would say they are the majority. But that's true across Latin America and the Caribbean as well. There are plenty of local Cuban Muslims who are there, who are allowed to be there, who use it as their prayer space. Is it politically motivated? Oh, yeah. I mean, of course it is. And its positioning, as you said, is very relevant. It's like putting it in Disneyland. You're trying to make a statement, right? There are plenty of tourists doing this thing. And they got a security guard there, though, interestingly, who does not allow you past craning your neck in. You don't get to go inside. It's not open to the public, right? And so they're limiting access, because once you get inside, you do see it as an active religious space. It is a political space. It's also, they don't want it to have it be an economic space. Those rules that I put up is about not selling certain things there. They said this is explicitly for religious purposes. Don't sell things here. This is not a free market space, okay? This is for praying and for education. That's it. And that was an interesting thing to see, because it's very common outside of mosques to sell incense and oils and food and Qur'ans and other things. That's kind of a marketplace, and you see that in various places, and they were not allowing that. So it's still controlled by the Cuban government in that way. So even though they may have built it that way, though, there are sub-economies and practices that are going to be going on there that they cannot control. And part of that is like people using that as a space and filling it with their own meaning. But I agree with you in your general interpretation, for sure. Yeah. I haven't been able to spend enough time there yet. I'd like to go back again and spend some more increased time to find out some of the deeper dynamics going on as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
You did mention about the Saudi Arabian and Turkish interpenetrator region funding that mosque in Havana. What about the Iranian penetration in the Islamic community in the region?
Yeah, I have not done much there, and I don't have much research, so I really can't speak to it. This one is something that I kind of stumbled upon anyways. My research has predominantly been with Puerto Ricans, and somebody from Cuba reached out to me to talk about it. But that never came up in that research, and I've not done too much. There are scholars, though, who have done a lot more on Iran and Shia Muslim communities, like down in the Tres Fronteras region, and how there are Lebanese and Shia Muslims who have been there for a long time and kind of exist in this kind of liminal zone along the three borders there. And then there are also significant Iranian communities in Mexico City where there's been good research done. And so I would definitely kind of follow up on those areas, but that's not been an area where I've done primary research, but certainly an area where other people are working. I wish I had more to give you, but you may follow up there. And if you want to talk afterwards, I can tell you the particular scholars doing that. Yeah. That's you, Richard. Yeah, you good.
My name is Mohammed. I am a second year PhD student in International Relations Department. My question is about the cohesion of the various Muslim communities across Latin America. I mean, I can understand, I can see that there are like Muslims here and there across the continent, but do they have like a sense of being a Latino Muslim? I mean, do they like communicate with each other? Do they like have, coalesce? I mean, do they have any kind of possibility into like coalescing into a more unified body which can represent the Muslims across Latin America? I mean, even though they don't have it, I mean, do they at least like have a sense of, being a Latino Muslim that can be used for their identity, at like more global speed?
Right. It's an excellent question. There have been fits and starts at creating even national communities, organizations in a sense of identity, of like in Brazil, to have like a Brazilian Muslim Association, or in Puerto Rico, or in different places that have existed perhaps for a time and then kind of fallen off because of funding or lack of support. And so they've struggled to create broader identities even on a national or subnational level. Even in particular mosques, there's difficulty of creating a shared identity. So the regional stuff has not really happened too much. But there are conferences that do go on. Turkey, in fact, hosted a conference of Latin American Muslim leaders, and they continue to host that every year. And that's politically motivated as well in what they're trying to do and build there. But they do gather 26 different representatives from different countries and regions, and there's a shared identity. In the Trinidad piece that I had there, they got together in Trinidad this summer to talk about Salafism in Trinidad and in the Caribbean region. So there are efforts at it. But where you see it most is with converts. They are building connections across the hemisphere in order to find others like them who have converted to Islam and who would identify as Latino ethnically as well. And they are then creating these organizations and communities, holding conferences, and doing, like missionary work, basically. So particularly in Mexico, after the earthquake, and now in Puerto Rico, they're raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to do work together and creating a sense of community across geographical boundaries. And so we see it most as among the converts, not necessarily among the immigrant population.
Can I have a follow-up?
I'm going to give a person another opportunity just to kind of bounce off, but we can talk afterwards too. Yeah, in the back there, in the left corner.
I actually had 2 points. Well, one of them is a question, the other one is also a question. But the story that you mentioned about Erdogan, and you talked about seeing the mosque. I have a cousin who actually is a specialist in Cuba, and I know that the more common understanding of the name Cuba comes from Guanacan, which is a Native American.
Yeah.
But I heard him say once that it was Cuba meaning the dome, Arabic word for dome. So the idea of Columbus arriving, or his explorers arriving and seeing the domes as the first of the mountains, right? Representing domes, like mosques. So I have heard that as well. But my question to you was, did you get any sense of talking to all these different communities? Do they have a sense of, was there any common conversation about international politics at all? Did you ask them? Did you engage in that? Do they?
In what sense? Like
in terms of, for example, how they view what is happening how they view in terms of the West and the Muslim world, or what's happening in the Muslim world. Were there any particular concerns that they had following international events, what's happening in the region, or what's happening in American involvement in the region? I'm just curious.
Yeah, and from multiple directions. So in Latin American context that they're in, they're concerned about Latin American politics as well as politics in Muslim majority nations. I would say both. Particularly among like Puerto Rican Muslims, they care very much about Palestine and vice versa, because what they see is their kind of liminal colonial situations where they are nations without nations, right? So they kind of share this solidarity there, and they get involved in each other's politics and have positions on that. The first image that I showed is a street artist who was involved with the takeover of the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras. He's a staunch independence supporter in Puerto Rico, but he's also, he actually converted to Islam because of his involvement in demonstrations for Palestinian independence and solidarity as well. And that comes through in his art and his talk. So there are those conversations happening. There are breakdowns in those conversations, different emphases on different syllables and emphasis on different syllables and stuff. But there is certainly the percolation in the conversation. And you're right. There are a lot of different ways people read into the history of Columbus and the discovery of the New World, et cetera. And at the very least, it shows that with Columbus and the other people on those ships, they brought Islam and Muslims in their imagination, at the very least, right? Question from this side. I think you've had your hand up the longest there. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. Usually can just skip the Trinidad part, but I think there's an important point.
Yeah.
The Muslim participation to ISIS.
Yeah.
What's your take on and what's your impression about the participation of Muslims to ISIS or Al-Qaeda around the world?
Yeah, I mean, so there was this article in The Atlantic called ISIS in the Caribbean, okay? And they talked about how among the Americas per capita, more individuals from Trinidad have gone to ISIS than anywhere else in the American hemisphere. Those statistics are true. There is a inter-community concern as well. The conference I mentioned this summer was there to address radicalization there and to develop CVE, or Countering Violent Extremism programs. So there is something going on. But I would say that the reports of Salafism and quote-unquote extremism, whatever label you use, are a little over-reported in Trinidad. And part of that is due to the history of Muslims in Trinidad, which includes Jamaat al-Muslimin, which staged a failed coup in July of 1990. They actually were able to take over the government and the TV station and tried to reinstate a new government over a land dispute. There's a long history there. But it put Muslims into the Trinidadian imagination as violent, as trying to overthrow the state, etc. But it also showed their story of people who were marginalized in society, felt that they didn't have access to the land that they had legally purchased. They are underemployed, involved in crime before converting, etc. And so there are also these people who are on the margins of society, and we often see that is where a lot of ISIS recruits come from. Not all, there's not like one explanation of why they go. So something's going on, but it's not as big of a fear, I think, as some people are making it out to be. But I think it's because, again, when you think of Muslims in Trinidad, there's the image of this guy who was the leader of the Jamaat al-Muslimin and their coup and the violence that they wrought then in their minds. So that's an area that people are still trying to figure out. And in fact, the Brookings Institution is doing a big study, and they're is studying Salafism globally, and they're looking at Trinidad as their case in the Americas, which is telling. Mm-hmm. They don't have much yet, though, because they reached out to me to tell them about it, which is not a good thing. Because I said, I'm not necessarily the expert, but I know some people who know more. And they're like, well, they don't like what we're doing. But anyways, I'm going too down the rabbit hole. But there's a lot of guessing, and there's a lot of fear-mongering. There's probably some reality there. Yep. Over here.
In your opinion, what will it take to establish this cohesion between the communities and surpass the ethnic prejudice that we have in the Americas? And it keeps increasing all over, even in Europe. In your opinion, what will it take to establish this?
I mean, it would be really, I think we'd be all unified. Just get your pens ready. I think we'd all be unified if a giant meteor just slammed into us and all of us died all at once. Then we'd have one common experience that we'd share. Sorry for the dark humor, but tribalism is very, very strong. We like to imagine that at some point in time we became modern, right? That we became based on higher ideals of global citizenship. But I would say that within every culture and community throughout the world, there's still a kind of tribal identity that is at work. And there's a great Muslim anthropologist and historian and sociologist, Ibn Khaldun, who wrote about Ummah, like the kind of global Muslim community, and Asaviya, this idea of kind of the group solidarity formed around a tribe. And I would say Asaviya is very strong at the moment. These different tribal identities is very strong in the US, in Europe, in Latin America, the Caribbean, elsewhere. I don't see any easy way or even any possible way going forward right now. I'm generally a pessimist, though. So if you figured that out, write a doctorate thesis or doctoral thesis, write the book, become the leader. And I joke a little bit there, but seriously, again, it's one thing to learn these historical factoids, another thing to talk about these communities, but another thing to live it out on the ground. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take learning new group solidarities, new ideas of us. But every time we create an idea of us, there's always a them. That's the problem. Every time we go, this is us, there always becomes a them. And maybe it's like, well, those people, they're so tribal, And the second we're doing that, it's like looking in the mirror. So I don't know how to overcome that. I don't. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned a statement earlier about, I think you said something about being like minority squared or something like that.
A quadruple minorities.
There you go.
Lots of syllables, very fancy. Yeah.
So how do you plan on researching that, or what do you think that kind of effect that has on people with coverage, figures, whatever name they want to call themselves? How, like, why would you force yourself into a minority? Has it come across you like they don't think it like that? Does it come across minorities? It's just like kind of a self-actualization for them?
Yeah, some of them don't really think about it when they convert. Like, it's not like what they're thinking about. They just convert. But some of them do think through that.
Like about the worries of it, right?
Yeah, the worries of it or the opportunities of it. You know, they're like, I was already a weirdo. That's how one guy said it. I might as well become a real weirdo. You know, like this guy Danny told me this. You know, he's just like, I already felt ostracized, and so I started looking outside of what my community told me I should be, Catholic or whatever it might be, and I found Islam. And then when they convert, I think that the kind of way to deal with that is that they form really strong group solidarity with other people like them. And they tend to do this because of the geographic distribution. They tend to really do this via online portals. So back in the 90s, they started using AIM, which is something called AOL Instant Messenger, okay? This is back when people had pagers and other primordial technologies. Yeah. So they connected on AIM. There's this very famous Latino American Dawa organization, LADO. They were big on AIM, okay? And everyone connected on that space. Now they use things like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp. That's how they connect with one another. They create conversations with one another. They put on national conferences in Houston and New York and other places to connect and be with one another because they realize they're on the margins of every community. And so they're starting to say, well, why don't we create a space where we're not minorities? And they're creating those spaces online and in the physical world.
Your kind of like area of interest is more like what drives them and what's the products of what afterward?
Yeah, I'm interested in the community dynamics and how they define us and them. I am interested in those aspects, not as a means to fix it, but just as a means to kind of understand it. Because I think it's something that not only Latino Muslims are dealing with, or Muslims in Latin America, the Caribbean are dealing with. I mean, we're all wrestling with this, as that question over there kind of showed. Over here, and I think this will be our last question. Yeah.
Isn't the example of the mosque in Cuba a perfect example of how Saudi money has and continues to influence world Islam and the world of Islam? And and it's interesting that someone raised the question about joining ISIS because obviously with the money comes their perspective on Islam and I think it's Salafi Islam. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, their particular ideology is Wahhabism. Yeah.
Conservative version of Islam that has influenced in the last decades the world, the Islamic world, because before there was a lot more variety on how to wear the hijab and how to practice, and through this money-backed influence through television programs, resources, mosques, imams that are sent, it's very interesting how they are shaping. And in a way, currently we don't have a caliphate. I mean, ISIS tried to start a caliphate, right. But in a way, Saudi Arabia is, expanding Islam and almost, creating these garrisons to, quote unquote, conquer, continue to conquer as it's the core of the Islam. So, I raised this question, have you observed that? And even this Department of Islamic Studies, has FIU received a substantial sum or donation to promote this type of studies? It's very interesting how money moves things.
Yeah, I don't know about FIU, and I'm going to sidestep that question and give you a 10-cent answer to your $10 question as well because of time, so we can continue this conversation later. Yes, Saudi money is kind of rife throughout the world in terms of building mosques, putting out programming, etc., funding students and scholarships to come and study in Riyadh or in Mecca, etc. And because of that, there are particular ideologies and practices, discursive traditions linked to Saudi power and money that are influencing Muslims throughout the world. We've seen a rise in ideologies that parallel or, in fact, mimic and copy Saudi perspectives. However, they don't control everything. So they may educate somebody, they may go to Mecca, they may come back and then start a mosque with the understanding Saudi is hoping that they will then allow them to exert influence then in a new space. But there are people who then push back on that in small and big ways. I know plenty of people who've been educated in Saudi Arabia who, yes, bring particular inflections on ideology when they come, but they also adapt that. They also work beyond that. And so it's not just a story of automatic Saudi influence and control through funding and power.
The Cuban imam that was there for 30 years or whatever, was a leader in the community, was immediately pushed to the side because someone else is paying.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. They are exerting power. They're attempting to exert power and influence, certainly. But there is a narrative out there that says, well, because they fund, then they are controlling. And the research says, no, they don't automatically control simply because they invest. Are they trying to control? Yes.
The influence is obvious.
Well, the influence is, I'm fully agreeing with you. The influence is obvious. But I don't think we should so easily move to then say the influence is totally powerful and is hegemonic. Well, it is hegemonic in a certain way, but it is not certainly all powerful and all controlling. There are areas of contestation and debate that are really interesting to me in particular. But it's 3:15, it's even past it, we're supposed to close up. However, I'm gonna step outside. If you wanna talk, you wanna continue to go, please do so, and we can do that.
This has been a production of Academic Video Services within the Division of Information Technology at Florida International University.